Shane Foster didn't think he just ran. The second, he saw the guy yank the purse from the woman's shoulder and take off down the crowded sidewalk, instinct kicked in. Shane shoved the stroller aside, making sure it was locked in place with his 4-year-old son, Gavin, safe inside, then sprinted after the thief. "Hey!" Shane shouted, weaving past tourists and office workers. "Drop it!" The thief glanced back, panicked. But Shane ran like a man who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. He tackled the guy near the hot dog cart on the corner of 5th and Lexington, sending both of them crashing to the pavement. The purse tumbled out of the thief's hand and skidded across the sidewalk. "Call the cops!" Shane yelled to a bystander as he held the guy down. Within seconds, 2 officers were there, pulling the thief off him and thanking Shane for stepping in. He barely heard them. His eyes were already on the woman standing a few feet away, clutching the now recovered purse to her chest. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicking. She was just staring at him like she'd never seen someone like him before. "Are you okay?" Shane asked, brushing dirt off his jeans as he stood up. She blinked, then nodded. "Yes, you chased him." "I saw what happened." He gestured to the stroller still parked nearby. "Didn't want my kid thinking you should just stand by when someone needs help." The woman looked over at the stroller. Gavin was watching everything with wide eyes and a half-eaten animal cracker in his hand. "You did that. With your kid right there," she said, something shifting in her voice. "He was safe. I made sure." Shane paused. "You sure you're okay?" She nodded again. "I'm fine, just..." Grateful. He gave her a short smile and turned back toward the stroller. "Well, glad you're all right. Take care." "Wait," she called after him. He turned. "I never got your name." "Shane," he said. "Shane Foster." She hesitated, then stepped forward and held out her hand. "Serena Jameson." He shook it. Her grip was firm, her eyes didn't flinch, but her skin soft, warm. "Thank you, Shane." "Anytime." And with that, he wheeled Gavin away, not thinking he'd ever see her again. He definitely didn't expect her to show up at his job 3 days later. It was a rough Tuesday. The plumbing van he worked for had broken down halfway through a service call. His boss was threatening to dock his pay for being late, and Gavin had a fever, which meant he had to call his neighbor last minute to babysit. Shane had just finished unclogging a sink in a Manhattan office building when the receptionist called up to him. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says it's important." He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked to the lobby, expecting maybe a customer complaint. Instead, there she was, Serena Jameson, in a tailored navy suit and heels that probably cost more than his rent. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a business magazine, not standing across from a guy in a stained company t-shirt holding a wrench. "Serena," he said, stunned. "I had to find you," she said, her voice calm but clear. "I asked around, tracked down your company. I hope that's not too creepy." He shook his head slowly. No, just unexpected. I wanted to thank you properly." She pulled out a white envelope and held it out. He didn't take it. "I don't want money," he said, tightening his grip on the wrench. She tilted her head. "It's not money, it's an invitation." "To what?" She smiled. "Dinner with me tomorrow night. I own a restaurant downtown. I want to say thank you in person." He blinked. "You own a restaurant?" "I own several, actually, and a few other things." She paused. "I'm the CEO of Jameson Group." Shane stared. She gave a small shrug like it meant nothing. "Google it." "I don't need to, I just..." "Wow." She handed the envelope to him anyway. 7 p.m. tomorrow. "Wear something comfortable." Then she turned and walked out, heels clicking against the marble floors, leaving him standing there like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. When he opened the envelope later, it wasn't just an invitation card, it was a reservation confirmation for a place he'd only ever seen in Manhattan magazines. Maison du Soleil. 5 stars, dress code enforced, celebrity clientele. He stared at the card, then at the small photo of Serena clipped to it. "Daddy," Gavin said from the couch, sniffling. "Who's that lady?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who might be a little out of our league, buddy." Gavin frowned. "Is she mean?" Shane laughed. "No, she's..." actually kind of amazing. The next night, he stood outside Mason du Soleil in his best button-down shirt, one he'd ironed twice, and jeans that didn't have any holes. He felt out of place the second he walked in. But the hostess smiled and said, "Right this way, mister." Foster, like he was someone important, Serena was already seated at a corner table, candlelight flickering against the amber walls. She stood when she saw him. "You came." "I almost didn't," he admitted. "I'm glad you did. Dinner was unbelievable: caviar, truffle risotto. Wine glasses that probably cost more than his monthly groceries. But Serena made it all feel normal. They talked, laughed. She asked about Gavin, about his work, about his life, and she shared hers too, not with arrogance or ego, just honesty. "I built Jameson Group from the ground up," she said, twirling her wine glass. "Started with one failing restaurant and a loan I wasn't supposed to get." "You're not what I expected," Shane said. "What did you expect?" He shrugged. "Someone cold, untouchable." She smiled. "I used to be." "So what changed?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You tackled a guy in the middle of Manhattan to get my purse back," he laughed. "That's all it took." "No," she said softly, "but it made me look twice." He went quiet, so did she. Then she reached across the table and touched his hand. "I don't meet men like you, Shane. Men who run toward danger. Men who raise their sons alone and still show up for the world." He looked at her hand on his and swallowed hard. "You don't know me." "I want to." The air between them shifted. He wasn't sure what would happen next. But for the first time in years, Shane felt something spark in his chest, hope, and she was looking at him like she felt it too. The sharp click of Serena's heels echoed against the stone path as she stepped toward the gated townhouse, her coat drawn tight against the evening wind. She hadn't been to Harlem in years, not since the Jameson Group bought out a block of failing retail spaces to convert into boutique cafes. But this street was untouched by all that a quiet, lived-in stretch of brownstones with cracked stoops and kids' bikes chained to iron fences. She checked the address again, then knocked. The door creaked open, and Shane stood there, holding a dish towel over one shoulder and a confused expression on his face. "You didn't mention you were coming by," he said, stepping aside. "I didn't plan to," she replied, walking in. "But I had a board meeting that ended early and I didn't feel like going back to my penthouse." He raised an eyebrow. "So you came here?" "I brought dinner," she said, lifting the paper bag in her hand. He closed the door behind her. "I already made something." "Hope you like spaghetti." She followed him into the kitchen, where the scent of garlic and tomato filled the air. A single pot bubbled on the stove, and a plate of sliced apples sat on the counter. Gavin sat at the table, crayon in hand, drawing something that looked like a fire truck with wings. "Hi," he said, glancing up. Serena smiled. "Hi again." He pointed at her shoes. "Those look loud." Shane laughed, and she crouched beside the table. "They do, don't they?" she said. "But they help me walk like I mean it." Gavin nodded like that made perfect sense, then went back to coloring. Shane pulled out a chair for her. "You really didn't have to bring anything?" "I wasn't sure what your policy was on guests," she said, setting the bag down. "So I brought pie." He looked over, surprised. "What kind?" "Peach bourbon." He whistled. "Now you're just showing off." She smiled faintly. "Maybe a little." They sat down to eat, Gavin chattering between bites about his teacher's pet snake and how he was going to build a rocket out of paper towel rolls. Serena listened carefully, asking questions without condescending, and Shane noticed how easily she slipped into their little bubble. After Gavin went to bed tucked in with a stuffed lion and a whispered promise that she'd come by again, Serena helped stack the dishes. "You didn't have to do that," Shane said, watching her rinse a plate. "I know," she said, "but I wanted to." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What are you doing, Serena?" She paused, hands still in the sink. "I'm not sure yet." He tilted his head. "You don't strike me as the type who does things without a plan." "I usually don't," she admitted, "but I hadn't planned on someone like you." He gave a quiet laugh. "You still haven't figured me out, have you?" She dried her hands and turned to face him. I know you fix water heaters and raise a boy who trusts you more than most people trust anyone. I know you don't pretend to be anything you're not. And I know that when I'm around you, I forget who I'm supposed to be. His mouth tightened slightly. Is that a good thing? I think so, she said. Though it scares me a little. He studied her for a moment. You get scared, she nodded. All the time, just don't show it. He didn't reply right away. Then he said, you know what scares me? Letting someone in. Then having to explain why there's more debt than savings, why the car doesn't always start, why I can't just take a weekend off and fly to Paris. She stepped closer. I don't care about any of that. He looked down at her. You say that now. I say that because it's true. The tension between them thickened, not heavy but charged like something waiting to happen. But instead of kissing her, he asked, why me? She blinked. What do you mean? You could be anywhere with anyone. Why show up here with pie and sit at a wobbly kitchen table with a single dad who hasn't had a vacation in 5 years? Her voice softened. Because I've been with men who could buy islands, and not one of them ever made me feel like I could just be. He didn't move for a long moment. Then finally, he said, you could have called first. I thought about it, she replied, but I'm used to making things happen. Waiting isn't my strong suit. He gave the smallest nod, then looked toward the hallway where Gavin's nightlight glowed faintly. You're not going to like how messy this gets. Try me, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. My ex left when Gavin was 2, no note, no goodbye, just gone. I've been picking up the pieces ever since. Serena didn't flinch. And you've done a hell of a job. He met her gaze. You're really not scared away yet? Not even close. He stepped forward, closing the last bit of distance between them. Then I guess I need to start figuring out what to do when someone like you doesn't leave. She smiled, slow and genuine. You could start by taking me somewhere that isn't 5 stars, he laughed. There's a taco truck around the corner that's open late. She held out her hand. Lead the way. They walked outside, the night cool and still. He didn't reach for her hand, but she hooked her arm through his like it had always belonged there. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they had something to prove. The warehouse was cold, even under the golden wash of evening sunlight bleeding through the high windows. Shane stood near the scaffolding, wiping his hands on a rag as the mechanical hum of a space heater buzzed in the corner. The place had been abandoned for years, but the new owner wanted a plumbing overhaul before converting it into a boutique event space. Shane was halfway through the job when his phone buzzed. Foster Plumbing, he answered, tucking the phone between his shoulder and ear. Tell me you're free Friday night, Serena's voice came through, lighter than usual, but edged with urgency. He glanced at the blueprints taped to the plywood wall. I've got 3 bathrooms still torn to pieces and a hot water line that sounds like it's begging for mercy. So unless you've got a wrench and steel-toed boots, I'm serious. I need you. He dropped the rag, suddenly alert. What's going on? There's a gala. Jameson Group's 10-year anniversary. We're hosting it at the Metropolitan. I need a date. He blinked. You want to bring the guy who fixes busted pipes to a $5,000 a plate gala? Yes. Serena, I already had an RSVP card printed with your name. Please don't make me lie to the press, he chuckled. You're impossible. I'm resourceful. And I happen to like being seen with you, he paused. What about Gavin? I already called your neighbor. Mrs. Holloway said she'd stay the night. He looked around the warehouse again, then let out a breath. All right. But if I trip over a violinist or insult someone's wine collection, you'll be perfect. When Friday arrived, he stood in front of the full-length mirror in the lobby of her building, adjusting the sleeves of a tailored black tuxedo that had been delivered to his place 2 nights prior. A small card had come with it. Wear this and trust me. He barely recognized himself. The jacket hugged his shoulders, the pants cut sharp and clean. Even the cufflinks shimmered like they knew they didn't belong to someone who drove a company van with a cracked side mirror. The elevator dinged, and Serena stepped out. She wore a satin gown in deep maroon, her hair swept up in a loose twist, a single diamond pendant resting at her collarbone. But it wasn't the dress or the jewelry that made him stare, it was the look in her eyes, that quiet spark that hadn't dimmed since the night she showed up with peach pie. "You clean up all right," she said, climbing into the waiting car beside him. He looked at her sidelong. "You say that like it's surprising." "It's not, but it's still nice to see." The gala was everything he expected and nothing he was prepared for. Chandeliers the size of trucks, waiters in white gloves, a string quartet playing something that sounded like it belonged in a palace. Every person in the room looked like they'd been born with a trust fund and a personal stylist. Serena didn't flinch once. She glided through the room, introducing him with a confidence that made him feel like he belonged there, even when his instincts told him he didn't. But she never once let him drift. Her hand found his arm, her voice never wavered when she said things like, "This is Shane Foster, he's a close friend." At one point, a woman in a sequined black gown leaned in and said, "You're the guy from the purse story, aren't you?" Shane raised an eyebrow. "That's what people are calling it now. It's gone around the board," the woman said with a laugh. "A man tackles a thief in broad daylight, very old school, very rare." Serena slid between them with a graceful step. "Rare is exactly right." Later, as the lights dimmed and the speeches began, Serena stood at the podium, the clinking of champagne glasses quieting the room. 10 years ago, I walked into a failing restaurant with nothing but a loan and a vision. I've made mistakes. I've made enemies. But I've also built something I'm proud of. And tonight, I want to thank someone who reminded me what real strength looks like. She glanced at Shane, then back at the crowd. Courage doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears work boots and carries a wrench. Soft laughter rippled through the room. And sometimes, she continued, it teaches you that the things you thought made you powerful, money, titles, rooms like this, mean nothing if you can't be honest with yourself. Shane didn't move. Couldn't. His chest tightened as the applause swelled. When she returned to the table, he leaned in. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said simply. Out on the balcony later, he stood beside her as the city glittered below. The air was cool, and her bare shoulders tensed slightly. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her. "You're not used to this," she said, adjusting the collar. "You think," she turned to him, "but you came anyway." "I came because you asked." She hesitated. "You know what I keep thinking?" He looked at her. "That night when you ran after that guy, you didn't know who I was. You didn't hesitate. You just acted. Would have done it for anyone." "I know, that's what scares me," he frowned. "Why would that scare you?" "Because I've spent my whole life around people who only act when there's something in it for them. You're different," he studied her. "And that's a problem. It makes me want things I told myself I didn't need." He stepped closer. "Like what?" "Like this," she whispered. He kissed her then. Not gently, not hesitantly, like a man who'd waited too long to believe something good could be real. Her hands wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, the city flickering behind them like it was holding its breath. When they finally pulled apart, she looked up at him, her voice low. "What happens now?" He ran a thumb along her jaw. "We stop pretending this is nothing, and if it gets complicated, then we figure it out." She pressed her forehead to his. "I don't want to lose this." "You won't." They stood like that for a long time, two people from different worlds finding a rhythm that made sense only to them. Inside, the music swelled. But out there, it was just them. The last vestiges of summer clung to New York's skyline. The air thick, with the kind of humidity that made the city feel more alive than usual. Shane leaned back against the bench in the park, while Gavin zoomed around the playground with his cape flapping behind him, pretending to save imaginary cities. Serena sat beside him, sunglasses low on her nose, a picnic basket tucked between them. "You know," she said, watching Gavin leap from the low jungle gym, "this is the first time in 3 years I've taken a full Saturday off without checking my email once." Shane looked over at her. "You sure you're not twitching from withdrawal?" She grinned. "There's a slight tremor in my left hand, but it's tolerable." He didn't say anything for a moment, just watched Gavin charge toward a slide, arms out like wings. Then he asked, "What happens when your board starts asking questions?" "They already have," she said. "I told them I'm not canceling my personal life to make quarterly projections feel safer." His brows lifted. "Did they buy that?" "They didn't have to. I own majority shares." He nodded slowly. "That doesn't mean they'll stop pushing." "Let them," she said. "I've worked too hard to be dictated to now." He turned to her. "And us. What does that look like in your world?" Serena took off her sunglasses and set them on the bench. "It looks like a man who doesn't disappear when things get complicated. A man who doesn't need to be impressed, just trusted." Shane folded his arms across his chest. "You sure you're not romanticizing me?" She looked at him directly. "You think I'd be here if I was?" He exhaled slowly. "I've been thinking about something." "Does it involve a rooftop with string lights and a jazz band?" He chuckled. "No, but now I feel like I'm under-delivering." She nudged his knee with hers. "Go on." "I was offered a job. A new one, private contractor for a development project in Queens. Better pay, bigger contracts, it's steady." Her eyes lit slightly. "That's incredible. Why didn't you lead with that?" "Because I'd have to register a business license. Build a team, it's a risk, and I'd be working later hours for a while." She tilted her head. "And you're worried I'll say you're not available enough?" "I'm worried Gavin will say that." Serena turned her gaze toward the playground. "You've raised a boy who runs toward people instead of away from them. I think you'll navigate this fine." Shane met her eyes. "You think this could actually work long-term?" "I think it already is." A few days later, Serena stood in the middle of her conference room, staring at a whiteboard filled with overlapping timelines and expansion plans. The executive team watched her carefully. "I'm stepping back from daily operations," she said, her voice cool and firm. "Effective immediately." A murmur rippled through the room. "You're retiring?" one of the VPs asked, stunned. "No, I'm restructuring." "I'll still be active on strategic initiatives, but I won't be available for day-to-day firefighting. I've appointed Ellis as interim COO." Her CFO leaned forward. "Is this because of the Foster contract?" She paused. "No. This is because I've built something strong enough to stand without me hovering over it, and I want to focus on the life I've been neglecting." The room fell silent. "I'm not asking for permission," she added. "I'm informing you." Later that night, Serena knocked on Shane's door with a bottle of wine and a file folder in hand. He opened it, hair damp from the shower, and blinked when he saw her. "You look like you just made $1 million decision," he said, stepping aside. She walked in. "Try several million." He raised an eyebrow. "I stepped back from the company today, not fully but enough." He shut the door behind her. "You serious?" "Very." He glanced down at the folder. "What's that?" "My part of the plan," she said, handing it to him. He opened it. Inside was a proposal for a new culinary development project in Brooklyn, complete with blueprints, investment backing, and a handwritten note clipped to the front, "Let's build something together from the ground up." He looked at her, stunned. "You're offering me a partnership?" "I'm offering us a future," she said. "I put your name on the contractor's agreement, but there's no pressure. If you want out, I'll tear it up right now." Shane set the folder on the table and walked toward her, hands in his pockets. "You really think we can mix this? The business, the kid, everything?" "I think we already are," she said, "but I also think you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop." He studied her. "I've never had someone believe in me like this." "Then let me be the first," she said softly. His jaw worked for a moment, then he reached for her hand and held it tightly. "You're not gonna let me walk away from this, are you?" "Not a chance." 2 months later, the new venture opened its doors part cafe, part community kitchen, part real estate anchor for a forgotten block of Brooklyn. Serena handled branding and investment. Shane handled logistics and construction. Together, they made it work. On the opening night, Gavin stood between them in a little button-down shirt, holding a giant pair of scissors for the ribbon cutting. He looked up at Serena. You gonna be my stepmom now? She glanced at Shane, startled, then looked back down at Gavin. Do you want me to be? He nodded. You're cooler than my teacher, Shane chuckled. That's a pretty high bar. Serena knelt. Then I'll do my best to keep up. Gavin grinned and handed her the scissors. Later, after the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Shane led her onto the rooftop terrace above their new space. There were no string lights, no jazz band. Just the city below them and the quiet hum of what they had built. He pulled something from his pocket, a simple silver ring, nothing flashy but solid. Real. She stared at it, breath caught. I don't have a yacht or a private jet, he said, but I've got a life I want to build with you. One you don't have to run from, one Gavin can grow up inside without wondering when it falls apart. She took the ring slowly, voice thick. You're not asking me to marry you here, are you? I'm asking if you'll say yes when I do. She closed the small distance between them and kissed him, deep and certain. When you do, she whispered, I'll already have said yes. He held her close, the city warm around them, their future already unfolding beneath their feet, and for the first time in both their lives, it didn't feel like they were chasing something. It felt like they'd already found it. The morning light poured through the windows of the Brooklyn loft, catching on the exposed brick and the delicate curve of Serena's shoulder. Shane stood in the kitchen, barefoot, flipping pancakes while Gavin sat at the counter, humming as he colored a comic about a plumber with superpowers. Can I give him a cape this time? Gavin asked, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth as he concentrated. Shane glanced over. Only if it's flameproof. You remember what happened last time. His boots melted. Exactly. Serena patted in quietly, still in one of Shane's t-shirts, her hair tousled from sleep. She paused in the doorway, watching them for a moment, a strange ache blooming low in her chest. Not the painful kind. The kind that came with knowing you were finally where you were supposed to be. You're up early, Shane said without turning, but his voice gentled when he felt her behind him. I didn't want to miss breakfast, she said, moving to wrap her arms around his waist from behind. You know, now that I'm not running a global empire every morning. He smiled at that, flipping a pancake with one hand and reaching to brush her knuckles with the other. You regret it yet? Not even a little. After breakfast, they packed up for the day. Gavin was headed to a birthday party at the Children's Museum, and Serena had a meeting with a city councilwoman about the community kitchen's outreach program. Shane helped Gavin into his shoes, tightening the laces carefully. You remember Mrs. Holloway's number if anything happens? Gavin nodded. And you'll be back before the cake. Wouldn't miss it, Serena added, kissing the top of his head. They dropped him off, and Serena stood outside the museum a beat longer than necessary, watching through the glass as Gavin ran to join a cluster of kids. Shane laced his fingers through hers. He's different now, she said quietly. Not so careful. Like he doesn't think everything could disappear anymore. That's you, Shane said. You gave him something steady. She looked at him. We did. The meeting at the councilwoman's office was surprisingly warm. Serena had expected resistance red tape. Budget concerns, but she'd come prepared with numbers, testimonials, and a plan for sustainable growth. What she hadn't expected was the way Shane sat beside her the entire time, quiet but alert, offering input when needed and grounding her when the conversation veered into bureaucratic haze. Afterward, as they walked back to the car, Serena turned to him. You didn't say much, but when you did, they listened. I know what it's like to need help and not know how to ask for it, he said. Sometimes it just takes one person saying you matter. She stopped walking, tugged his hand until he turned to face her. I wish I'd met you sooner. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You met me exactly when you were supposed to. That night, after Gavin was asleep, Serena brought out a small, wrapped box. She set it on the table between them with a strangely nervous look on her face. What's this? Shane asked, drying his hands from the dishes. Open it. Inside was a leather-bound journal. On the first page, in her handwriting, was a single sentence. This is where we start writing the rest. He looked up at her. It's beautiful. I wanted to remember this, all of it. Not just the big moments, the little ones too. He reached for her hand. There's no version of this story I want to tell without you in it. She leaned in, her voice lower. Then let's keep writing. They curled up on the couch, the city quiet around them, the scent of lavender from the candle flickering on the windowsill. In the weeks that followed, life found a rhythm. Serena's outreach program received its first grant approval. Shane hired 2 more contractors and started mentoring local high school students interested in the trades. Gavin became obsessed with astronomy and convinced Serena to help him build a cardboard observatory on the roof. One Sunday afternoon, as they all sat on that rooftop with paper stars strung from the railing, Gavin looked up from his telescope. Are you two gonna get married or what? Shane nearly dropped his cup of lemonade. Serena blinked. That's a pretty big question, she said. It's not that big, Gavin replied. I already told my teacher you were. Shane laughed, then looked at Serena. Well, she tilted her head, pretending to consider. I guess we'd better make it official then. 3 months later, in the community space they'd built together, beneath a canopy of twinkle lights and surrounded by people who had become family, Shane and Serena stood hand in hand. Gavin walked her down the aisle, holding her fingers proudly. There were no extravagant floral arrangements or gold-plated invitations. Just honest vows, warm smiles, and a room full of people who had witnessed a love that wasn't born out of convenience or fantasy, but something real. Earned. Honest. I never expected you, Serena said, her voice steady. But I've never been more grateful for anything in my life. Shane took her hand. I didn't think I had room for anything else, but you showed me there's always more when you let love in. They sealed it with a kiss, loud applause echoing through the space, Gavin hollering louder than anyone else. That night, as they lay in bed, the city quiet below and the stars just visible through the window, Serena turned to him. You know we're still writing that journal. He pulled her closer. Then let's fill every page. Outside, the wind carried the sound of laughter from a nearby rooftop. Inside, a family once fractured, now whole, dreamed of everything still to come. And they knew without doubt, hesitation, or fear that they had already found everything they'd ever been searching for in each other.